Caitlin Clark Rookie of the Year combos are ramping up, but let's take a look backwards and walk through memory lane and talk through what she's accomplished in her collegiate and pro career so far. We'll also look forward later in the show. What is Caitlin Clark's ceiling? All that and more today on Locked On Women's Basketball.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Talia Goodman, and I cover the Indiana Fever for the Next. And our guest for the day, Angie Holmes, is the expert on all things Caitlin Clark. Of course, she covers college basketball for the Next and covered a whole lot of Clark's college career. We know you want to hear it, so we will be talking all things Clark today. This is a fully Clark episode. But first, thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Remember that Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by everyone at The Next, a place where we cover women's basketball 24/7 and tell the stories that need to be told every day. Subscribe now to support the staff at The Next. It's $9 a month or $72 a year, and you can find us at thenexthoops.com. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's show, we are going to dive into Clark's college impact, take a look at the Rookie of the Year race, and talk through the future for Clark a little bit. So, Angie, is Caitlin Clark the best player that you've seen covering college basketball?
She is certainly the most exciting. You know, when I started watching her, I'm from Iowa, so I'm an Iowa fan. So that year of the pandemic, when there weren't any fans, so not a lot of people really were talking about her that year. They were talking about Paige Beckers, you know, rightfully so. But you know, I think Caitlin came out and, you know, I think her first game, she scored like 27 points, you know, and it was like, wow, you know, we knew she was the 4th ranked in the country. So we expected some good things, but you know, you don't know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, really that freshman year, you knew that she was going to take off. Maybe not as much as it ended up to be, but yeah, you knew watching her from the beginning.
Were you wondering why it didn't happen with the kind of national buzz that we got until her junior year? Because I feel like there was buzz before that, right? And rightfully so. But her junior year was when everything went nuts, right? Like the whole landscape of women's college basketball went crazy in very, very large part to her. Were you kind of wondering why that didn't happen sooner with her?
You know, when you're actually just watching it, sometimes you don't know what the rest of the world's thinking. So I think the big turnaround was that game against Indiana when she hit that last second shot. It was just being there. It was the most incredible live sporting thing I've ever seen. You know, there's like less than a second left. You know, we just kind of thought, well, you know, they'll take the loss and that's okay. And Kate Martin threw it into her and she made it, kind of bounced a little and she made it. And just that atmosphere, I think it was incredible. And I think that's when that fire kind of caught on. Yeah. And then, you know, when they obviously made it to the Final Four and to the national championship, had a lot of eyes on her.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And funny enough, you mentioned that Iowa-Indiana game because you're in Iowa. I'm in Bloomington right now, so I remember vividly. I wasn't able to be there for it, but I was in a hotel room with my mom watching that game. I only covered Indiana at that point, and I was watching, and I was like, "Oh, they got it in the bag. Indiana's got this one easy, right?" Like, end of the game, it's over. Like, lucky they scooped it out, but they got it. But nope, Caitlin Clark had something to say about that one. My mom was screaming, jumping up and down. She was like, what is going on? She didn't follow women's basketball much at that point. She was like, oh my God, this Caitlin Clark girl is pretty good, right? Like, she's pretty good, which I thought was funny. But there have been so many moments over the years through her college career, through her professional career so far, where she has made history and drawn masses to be watching her at all times. What's your personal favorite memory of Caitlin Clark, whether it's, her game or her saying something, whatever it might be?
Oh, boy. Well, I mean, the night that she broke Kelsey Plum's record against Michigan, it was something else, because I was at that game before. I was in Lincoln, Nebraska, when there was a possibility she could break it, and then they blew a big lead in the fourth quarter and lost, and so it was almost a letdown. But then you knew she was like 8 points away going into that game against Michigan, so you knew she'd break it early. So just that excitement going in, and then when it happened, and then it just kept on going. I think she had like 20 points in the first quarter,
Yeah.
So it was just electric the whole night. So I think that's probably my favorite memory.
Yeah, and I remember I was watching that game while at a different game. I was watching that on my computer. And I remember seeing like the little countdown, right, on the side of it, of the countdown of how many points Caitlin Clark has left. And I think they've been doing it for 2 games at that point. And I just think it's so cool, like what she has been able to do for women's basketball. Like you can't lie about it. Like there's no saying she was not a huge part of this, right? She might not have been the only part of it, and she wasn't the only part of it, but she was kind of undeniably the biggest part of this surge and this growth that we're seeing, whether it's those buzzer beaters that we just talked about, or whether it's her breaking records. It's kind of, you look left, you look right, she's doing something. What else? What stands out about her more as a person? What did you see from her when you were covering her? How did she handle this pressure that was just kind of thrown onto her?
For someone that young, or any age, really, I mean, it's just incredible the way she handles that pressure. And especially even now, everybody's talking about her, whether it's good or bad. She stays very even keeled. I don't think she really fights back a lot on social media. I know it's got to be tempting.
I'm sure.
When they're talking about her boyfriend or her family or whatever, what she's wearing, but I think Lisa Bluder really ingrained that in her players, that just don't look at it. Lisa said once, you can get 100 compliments in one setting, and somebody says one thing bad, and that's the one thing you're going to remember. Right. So yeah, I know at that age, it's hard to stay off of social media, and I'm sure she looks at it. But just the way I think she handles that stuff doesn't engage in a lot of the extracurricular talk.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anyone handle pressure and media settings better than she does. And I say that over and over again. And I'm obviously at the home games for the Fever, and I'm listening to her and how she's handling some of these situations. And I'm like, man, like they have it easy over there. They don't have to worry about her saying anything bad. Like she is just so on top of it. She's so, I don't know if it's well media trained or just how she is. Like I think part of it is just how she is.
I was gonna say a little bit of both. I think, I don't know if it's cliche to say that she's made for this, but I think she is. She wasn't one of those who's, just kind of, well, I might be famous or I might be great. No, she knew, I think from a young age that this was the goal. So I think that maybe that prepared her. I know her parents have prepared her quite a bit. So yeah, it's incredible just to watch how poised she is. I used to get nervous in press conferences, like that one that she broke the record. It's a big deal, and you're just sitting there, you're just kind of nervous, and she just walks in, and so yeah, I think she's made for it.
100%. Next up, we are going to dive into what Caitlin Clark did for Iowa women's basketball, for women's basketball in general. And then we're going to talk about the Rookie of the Year race, which is kind of the topic on everyone's mind right now. There's been discourse about it all over. Is it Caitlin? Is it Angel? Who is it? How has Caitlin adjusted to the pro ranks, right? So we're going to talk about that next. But first, I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down and the Olympic break is getting here, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And now I gotta tell you that my New Year's resolution was to cut back on sugar, and Magic Spoon makes that easier and more delicious than ever. I absolutely love Magic Spoon's variety pack because it has 4 flavors that I can cycle through every single morning. The 4 flavors are cocoa, fruity, frosted, and peanut butter, and they are all so delicious. It has 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. And it is only 140 calories per serving. It's high protein, it has 0 grams of sugar, it's keto friendly, it's gluten friendly, it is everything friendly, it's soy free. I love to eat the fruity flavor right when I wake up every morning. It really is just so good. So be sure to go to magicspoon.com/lockedon to grab a variety pack for yourself and try it today. And be sure to use our promo code LOCKEDON at checkout to save $5 off your order. Be sure to, and Magic Spoon is just so confident in their product that it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money with no questions asked. Remember to start your day off right with a delicious bowl of high-protein cereal at magicspoon.com/lockedon and use the code LOCKEDON to save $5 off. Thank you, Magic Spoon, for sponsoring this episode. All right, let's dive into some more Caitlin Clark here with Angie Holmes. Angie, you live in Iowa. You said that you've been an Iowa fan. What did Caitlin Clark do for Iowa women's basketball?
Well, I'm a big Megan Gustafson fan. So what she did, she started. I mean, I was always been good. You go back to Vivian Stringer, you can go way back. They've always had a tradition. But when Megan kind of brought that national spotlight, winning National Player of the Year, making it pretty far in the tournament. You kind of thought, wow, that's the height, And again, when that pandemic year, we all knew that she seemed pretty special, and it just kind of as it went along, So this past year was the year that they sold out all the season tickets. 15,000 in Carver every game. And then you go to the away games and those sell out too. And again, it's different when you see it, when you live it, you don't quite understand how special it is until you go to another game. Like I said, I went to Lincoln, Nebraska for that game. And there's just people lined up 2 hours before the game. You're like, wow, this is a big, I mean, it's a big deal, but until you really see it.
And they're all wearing Caitlin Clark gear.
Yeah. And see it somewhere else. You're like, wow, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
So yeah. And what she's done for Iowa basketball, like I said, people have always supported Iowa basketball, women's basketball, girls, high school, all of it. But yeah, it's a whole new level. I've read comments now. Obviously Caitlin's gone, Lisa Bluter's gone, but she's created fans across the country, who are going to pay attention to Iowa basketball.
100%.
So,
yeah. And no matter how they're doing all year, there are going to be more fans than there were before she got there, right? There's going to be more national attention on Iowa because of what she did, no matter if she's there or she's not there, now that she left that mark on the program, right? So everyone's going to be paying attention. And I think she did a similar thing for women's basketball nationally. Like the amount of eyes that are on the sport, and it's not just because of her, and we can't, claim that it's just because of her. There are so many talented players. But I think Caitlin Clark, I think what she is this entry point, right? You see her on SportsCenter, you see a play, you're like, wow, that's cool. Like I didn't know that was happening in women's basketball, right? Like for the average beginner fan, you see a play, then you go watch a game, and once you watch a game, you're hooked. And she said that before too. It's like once you go to one game, like you can't stop. You're stuck on it. So how have you kind of seen that play out on more of the national landscape?
Well, I mean, I think people didn't really know I've been following the WNBA. Like I said, I came in with Megan and really didn't know anything. And then within like the first season, I totally got hooked on the WNBA and all of women's basketball. And so now you see that happening again on a much wider scale, national scale. You know, people want to watch, they'll watch Caitlin play and they'll be like, oh, wow, do you see Asia Wilson play or do you see Angel Reese play? And it's just that those eyeballs get to see how good the women's basketball is. And then you do get hooked. So I've seen that a lot with people who come in as Iowa fans or just Caitlin Clark fans. And then they start watching and they're like, oh, yeah. So, yeah, she rises it up, you know, gets the eyes on there initially. And people get hooked.
I see it even like my roommates. I have 3 roommates here. None of them are into sports whatsoever, not women's, not men's. They're not into sports. It's just not their thing, right? But the only time they've ever talked to me about sports is, should I bet on Caitlin Clark tonight? You think she's going to hit the over? I'm like, oh my God, like, where did this come from? Like, I love this. This is so cool. Like, you have never mentioned a male athlete to me, but you're talking about Caitlin Clark. And I think that's just the really cool part of it, is that she is this national topic of conversation, no matter who you are, no matter where you're from. I think that's the best part of what she's done for the game, 100%. But now that she is graduated from Iowa, she is on the Indiana Fever, which is ironic because she said that Indiana is a school that, you know, didn't like her very much and maybe had a bigger crowd at the away games than she's used to normally, but she's here in Indiana. How have you seen her adjust to the professional ranks? Is it how you thought it would go?
Yeah. You know, I know there was the last, or not, maybe not the last, but when Iowa played Indiana during the season, you know, and there's always discourse on Twitter and everything else, and people saying, "Oh, she's going to be scared of those Indiana fans." Now, I was thinking the total opposite. No, she likes those passionate fans, whether they're booing her or chiding her. You know, that's what she wants. She wants passionate fans. So when Indiana got the pick, I was like, yep, she's coming out, because I knew that would be just a great fit, because, you know, Indiana is such a great state for basketball and women's basketball. So
how have you seen her kind of adjust to the professional ranks? What have you felt has gone well? What do you think she maybe still has to improve on? How has she looked to you?
Well, you know, I've watched her more than just the sports highlight, you know, the ESPN highlights. You know, I think people get stuck on that. Oh, she hits, you know, is she going to hit 20 logo threes? You know, quite frankly, she does miss a lot of shots, and she always has, but she takes a lot of shots. You know, the turnovers, her passes are risky.
Yeah.
You know, so as far as people saying, well, I didn't think she did that in college. She didn't miss that much in college or had that many turnovers in college. Well, she did. I mean, if you watch a whole game, she did. So I think it's pretty equivalent. Whether she's that much better or not as good, from what I've seen so far, it's pretty equivalent to what she was doing in college, just as at a bigger stage, you know, with more people watching.
I think it's impressive that she's been able to even be like at that equivalent mark against the talent that she's going up against every night. I think that's what's really impressive to me, is like she's going up against women who are bigger, who are stronger, who are all these things that you don't have in the college game, like, because there's 300 however many teams and they're not all great, and there are players who are smaller. They're not at the same level. Like, there are very few players who make it to the W. Obviously, she was going to be one of them, right? But the talent that she's going up against is of much higher caliber, and I think that's what's been most impressive to me, is that people can say, yeah, she's doing what she did in college, but she's playing, like, they don't realize what the W really is. It's the best of the best, because there's 12 rosters. Like, there's not many players that make it that far. So that's what I've been impressed with so far. quickly here, obviously the Rookie of the Year race is ramping up right now. It's the topic on everyone's mouths, it seemed like. Do you think Caitlin is deserving of that Rookie of the Year award based on just what we've seen so far? Obviously, we don't know how the rest of the season's going to go, but based on what we've seen so far.
I do. She's taken Indiana and made them better. I know there's been some struggles. There's always going to be struggles. They weren't used to each other. They play practice together for a couple of weeks. But she's still pulling off the scoring, and people really underestimate her passing. I'm glad that people are seeing more of her passing now. Because you hear about the logo threes. No, she's a shooter. She's a scorer, which she is. But her passing is really what, in that court vision, I think, what really sets her apart. And the defense is coming along. She's always been a rebounder. I think that's because people always want to get back to guard her. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, she's been very impressive. Right now, I have her as my Rookie of the Year with Angel Reese very, very shortly behind her. I think what both of them have been able to do is really impressive. But like you said, I think it is her playmaking, her passes that really impressed me the most. And those turnovers will come along with that, right? You have to understand that when you're adjusting to a new team in a new league, like you said, the passes are risky, and other people have said this too, but sometimes her teammates just aren't ready for her passes yet. They hadn't adjusted to it at that point. And you see the turnover rate going lower and lower as time goes on. And so I think that's the biggest thing that we're seeing is, maybe at the beginning of the season, the turnovers were very high. There were a lot of turnovers each game.
And they were in college too. I mean, it's just when you have risky passes like that happens, and she had 3 or 4 years to kind of gel that with her Iowa teammates,
No,
so
exactly.
It doesn't just happen. So,
right. Well, it will come. And up next, we will talk about Caitlin Clark's expectations going forward. We're heading into the Olympic break, but we still got another half or so of the season coming up after that. So we'll talk about expectations for Caitlin Clark. What is her ceiling? Where does she go from here? We'll talk about that after this. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, Angie. Caitlin Clark, she has done a lot of things in college and in the WNBA that people, never thought was possible. She's already breaking records in the WNBA. She had a triple-double. She's done incredible things, and people are paying attention to it, which is amazing. But where does she go from here? I guess we'll start with the immediate future, right? This season, do you think she keeps up this pace? Obviously, she's making the Indiana Fever a better team. They've had, one of the best records in the WNBA as of late. Do you think she keeps this up for the rest of the season? Is she continuing to go on an uphill trajectory right now?
Yeah, I do. Especially with this break. She's been playing since, I know last summer. Right. They practiced, and then you go through your whole season, and then you make it to the national championship. And so, she's been, playing, and there was discourse, with how much minutes she played at Iowa, and now she's playing pretty much similar minutes at Indiana. You hear people, well, there's no way she can keep that up. No way she can keep that up. Well, those of us who knew that she could. But yeah, having this break will be good for her, and she will keep it up, and it will get better again. just getting more familiar with their teammates, and they kind of know that these passes are coming, or and more familiar with the league and the defenses that they're coming at her. I mean, she's always had, top defenses, coming at her, triple teaming, whatever. So that hasn't changed. So I just think it will get better.
And it is crazy that this is her first break in about a year. That's nuts, right? Like, that's crazy. Sure, maybe we don't count the summer as much, but even from November on, like, she has not stopped playing basketball. All she has done is play basketball. Like, she maybe had a few days before the WNBA season started, but she'll finally get some real time off. And I think, like you said, I think it'll be really good for her and much needed. But going further than just this year, what is Caitlin Clark's ceiling? Is there a ceiling? Could she be the best player in the WNBA in 5 years? What's the ceiling for her?
I mean, she could be. I mean, like you said, the WNBA, there's a lot of good players. It just depends, if it's going to be more than scoring, if it's going to up that defense. It depends on your team, on how your team's doing. So I don't know. I guess I can't say right now that in 5 years she will be the best player, because there's a lot of good players, but she will continue to get better.
What do you think?
Which is weird to say, because she's already so good.
That is true. What do you think is the biggest thing that she has to do, kind of tangible thing that she has to work on to get to maybe the next level of her game, which is another crazy question, because is there a next level of her game? Like, that's crazy to think about, but what does she have to do?
Well, again, the defense, I think people say a lot about the defense, but it's pretty good. So she rebounds, she blocks shots, she gets steals, but she does expend a lot of energy on offense. So maybe that balance of where are you going to expend your energy? Are you going to save a little more for defense? So just keeping that balance, knowing where to expend that energy, and again, Caitlin's Caitlin. She can get frustrated. Yeah. That's nothing new. So it's just kind of focusing on the game. Not that she doesn't, but I know there's times everybody gets frustrated, but it's just, you got to get over it. So I think, and I know she's grown a lot, especially since obviously her freshman year in college, so just as maturity goes on and familiarity, that will just help her along.
Yeah, absolutely. And then last thing I got for you, it has been about 2 years-ish, right? Or 2 seasons of Caitlin Clark getting the hype that she's gotten, Clarkonomics, all those words that are coming to mind right now. It's been 2 years of that. She's now in the WNBA. That attention has continued, right? Now that she's entered the pro leagues, which, maybe people even doubted that would happen if those fans would stick around as she got to the league, all the newbies. But do you think it will continue in, I don't even a year? Like, do you think this is what the future of women's basketball looks like, is what it is right now, and all the hype it's getting and all the media coverage and the need for this, right? Do you think it's here to stay?
I do think it's here to stay. And it's not just because of Caitlin. Like I said, people, they might start watching because of her, but then they find other players and other teams that they watch, and the college season's so exciting. So I think, just having it year round, you have the WNBA in the summer and then the college in the winter. I actually think people disagree on that, whether
I think
that's
great.
a good, I like it.
Me too. What else? There's nothing going on. Everyone's eyes are on women's basketball all year round. You always have constant women's basketball. What's better than that?
Yeah. And so, you have your favorite college players, and then they make it to the WNBA maybe, or they go overseas, and you still follow them. And then again, you just start liking everybody else. So, right. So no, I think it will stay at a high level.
I hope it does. And I think
it will.
The Caitlin Clark fans will continue to be Caitlin Clark fans, and then they'll become fans of everyone, of women's basketball as a whole. But like you said, I think it is absolutely here to stay.
Mhm.
Before we let you go, I want to tell everyone about ourselves. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thank you so much, Angie, for joining us today to talk the player on everyone's mouths and minds and eyes right now, Caitlin Clark. A full Caitlin Clark episode today. I love it. You can't talk enough about her, right? Like you really
can't.
You can't. But appreciate having you on to chat, and we will chat soon.
Okay, thanks for having me.